Hi, this is PR Frank, and we're continuing our tutorial about HTML versus Dreamweaver. I'll show you a few things on how to create HTML in a text editor and then how to do the same thing in Dreamweaver. So far, we've created a basic structure of a website, and it looks like this. Now I'm going to add styling to it to make it look like this. It's all the same content, but it just has styles applied. So let's begin. So here in Text Wrangler, which is what I'm using for my code editor, what I have to do is I have to get a CSS style sheet going. So the first thing that I want to do is in my head tag, I'm going to use the link tag, and the link tag is going to have several properties. First, we make it relative to style sheet. Then we tell it it is a type text/CSS. And finally we tell it where it is, href equals, and we're going to call it styles.css. It hasn't been created yet, and I think I'll also put it inside of a folder called CSS. So that's what that means with the / there, and it'll know just where to find that style sheet. So let's create that style sheet. I'm going to create a new text document and write immediately, choose Save As, and so far in my tutorial I've been saving stuff in here. I'll make a new folder called CSS as I wrote in the code, and the name is just going to be styles.css. There we go. And then what we do here is we should start adding styles. So for example, these things are called selectors. I want to tell the body of my HTML to be a certain color. So I type in the word body and I put curly braces, next line, closing curly braces, and in between these two curly braces is where I put a property and a value, and the property I want is background-color, and the value that I want for the background color is selected from a website. I went to this website that generates colors, and I like this nice light green for my background, so I'll select this hexadecimal color code, copy it, come back over and paste it in. And it didn't paste the hashtag, so I need to make sure to put that in there and a semicolon at the end. So now if I save that and I go refresh, it is now green. And we'll continue to make some changes like that. Let's do a couple more. So the next thing I want to do in my style sheet is say header. Anything that's in my header is going to have a background color of a different sort. And if we look at the finished product, we can see I used that blue from the Generate Colors website. So I'll grab the hexadecimal color code for the blue, come on back over and paste that in, and give it the semicolon. And the other thing I want to do for my header is give it a width. I want to start defining how wide that thing is so it doesn't just go all the way across the page. And I think a value of 750 pixels is just fine for that. I also want to leave room for any text that's in my header so it's not stuck up against the edge by adding padding. And I want to add padding at 10 pixels all the way around, so I just type in 10 pixels and it'll give that some nice padding. Let's see how that's beginning to look. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to this and refresh, and now you can see I have a 750 pixel box with a little bit of padding separating the edges, and it's that blue. Alright, so I can just continue to style my page like that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just open the style sheet that I created for this. I kind of hid it down in here. Okay, I'm going to open that. These are all the styles that I used. There's quite a lot going on there. You can see I styled my H1 so that it has a special font and special spacing, special variant. I styled colors for my H2 and my aside, main, footer, and even a container, which I'll tell you about next. So let me just select all of that, copy it, and paste it into this CSS. Okay, so now we have all of the styles. You can choose to put the at character set to make sure it has character set, but that also can be defined in your HTML. This container is something I want to tell you about. So what I did is I took my whole website and I wrapped it in a container. Some people call it a wrapper. Container is what I'm choosing to call it. And I use this hashtag. What that is an ID, and an ID is something you use just once in a website. And for this, I'm just going to use this container one time to wrap around my entire website. I gave it a width of 770 pixels, which after doing the math on all this widths of the main and the aside and the footer and the header, turns out to be exactly 770 pixels wide. And I also did margins. And here you see a margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. I could also reduce that to a single value just called margin, and using kind of a clockwise approach, I'm going 0 at the top, auto at the right, 0 at the bottom, and auto at the left. What that does is it centers all of that content that's inside of the container, which is my whole website, in the browser window. Okay, so in order to use this container, I also have to go to my index page and insert something to use that ID. So I can go div, which is a division on the page, and choose ID, since that was an ID starting with a hashtag, container, and then I'm not going to close this opening div tag until the very end of my page, right before the body. So now I can put a closing div tag in there, and a lot of times what designers do is with div tags, since there can be multiple div tags, is they put a comment in, and this is how you do an HTML comment, and I can write closing container div. Okay, and that lets me and anyone else that's looking at my code know that, hey, this is the closing div tag for the container, and it doesn't show up in the web page if you comment it out like that. So now that I have that, let me save that and come back over to my browser and refresh. And as you can see, my website now displays nicely, and it's used all the styles that I pre-configured in my style sheet. And this is what the style sheet looks like. It's a separate file from the index.html. So now I'm going to show you how to do the same thing in Dreamweaver. It requires a little less code and some visual tools. So if I come over to Dreamweaver, here's the site from before. And the way that we get to do this is we go to our CSS Designer tab. And you'll notice there are no sources for CSS. And the way that we get that is we click on the Add New CSS Source button, and it gives us a choice to do some things. I can attach the existing one that I already have, or I can create a new one. I'm going to create a new one and then later on use the existing one. So here's how I create the new one. I click on Browse. I browse for the location of the tutorial for Dreamweaver. There it is. Inside of there, I'm going to make a brand new folder called CSS and call it the same as I did before, styles.css, and save that. I want to make sure it's linked, and it'll automatically add a link tag. So when I say OK, you'll notice if you scroll to the head, you'll see it inserted that link tag just like we did before. It's got the attributes in different places, but it doesn't matter. It's all the same. And you'll notice now over here in the CSS Designer panel, we now have a styles.css as a source for styles. And in order to start adding styles, we select part of our document. In this case, I'm going to go click on body, and if I click on the plus sign next to selectors, it automatically adds that body tag to let us know, hey, we're about to style the body. Okay, press enter, and down here in the properties panel, you might have to drag that up a little bit. I had to do that when I first started. Drag it up so you can see a lot of those properties. What it does is it lists all those properties here, and if you have the show set checked, you might want to uncheck it because it's better to see everything so you can see all of the choices you have for styling your document. These 5 across the top are the different categories. You can click through those different categories to bring up the different kinds of things that you can add, whether it's layout or your text or border properties or background properties. So since we know for our body we want to add a background color, we can go back to that site where we generated colors. The background color was this. Copying that, coming back over, and I can just click right in the undefined box and paste, making sure to put the hashtag in there. No need to put a semicolon at the end. It'll do that for me. So I'm going to press return, and now we have a nice green background color. It gives us immediate feedback here in the window at the top. We're in design mode. It's got a split between design and the code. And if we click over here, this is our main page, but if we click here, it'll tell us anything that's related to the page. So in this case, we've linked to a CSS file, which will style it. If we click it, it shows that, and look at that. It put the background color property in, as well as the hexadecimal color code and a semicolon it added for us, so we don't forget that thing. All right. The asterisk up here means we haven't saved it yet, so it'll quick Command S or Control S will save that. And up here we have an asterisk. We haven't saved our index page yet, so we can do that as well. So now I can continue to add styles. I'll add just a couple more to show you how it's done. So now I want to add styles for my header. I can click that, and if I click the plus sign next to selectors, what Dreamweaver does is it's always going to do these descendant selectors. And so in this case, we have a header that's inside of the body tag, so it's going to say body space header. We don't need all that, so I just delete the stuff we don't need. If I just say header, like I did in the style sheet for the text editor, it will work just fine. I press enter, and I can begin to style that. For the background color of the header, we had that nice blue once again, and I can just click on background, put that as the background color. Don't forget my hashtag. And now my header has that. We come over here to the border properties, and if we scroll around here, we can see that there are lots of properties. Width is one I want. For pixels, I missed for pixels. I want 750. That's shorter there. And I also added some padding. And here's the padding. I can just type in 10px, and if I click the link in the middle, it'll get 10 all the way around, and it shows you a visual image of these diagonal lines that shows you where it's added the padding around. So that's pretty cool, and you just continue to style it in that way by selecting something in your code or even on your page. For instance, if I wanted to style the H2 in a certain way, I click right inside of aside, and if I click on selectors, it knows it wants the H2. Once again, I can delete all the other stuff there. I just want to style the H2, and the color I used for the H2 on my page was that blue once again, which I can just, it's already copied, so I can just go to my text properties now, and under color, paste that color with the hashtag, and now that turns blue. So it's a pretty simple interface. It adds a lot of the code for you. It kind of lets you see in a really quick snapshot all the styles that are available to you, as well as the ones that you've already used. If I click on show set, it's only going to show the things that I've applied to that. You see I've applied a couple of things to the header, width and padding and a background color. So unchecking show set gives you all of the properties, and checking show set shows you what properties you have already added to that selector. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this source and delete it, because I'm going to attach the existing CSS style sheet that I already have, and I want to first of all move it. I'm going to go to my Finder real quick, and it's here. I want to go ahead and throw it into the DW one here. As you can see, my website changes quite a bit to reflect all of those changes. Now, in my, as you can see, in my selectors, I do have that container once again. Before we insert the div for our container, actually it's a little easier in Dreamweaver to get rid of the existing selector. So I'll just hit the minus sign. It deletes that selector out of there. So if we go in our styles, we can see it's no longer there. All of our other styles are untouched, however. Let's save some stuff here. So when we insert it, it'll insert the tag along with any styles we want, which is really nice. So we can put our insertion point where we want our div to start. And because we want our div to wrap around all of this other content, I select it all the way down past the footer and I release. So now it's going to wrap around everything that I have selected. I'm going to go to my insert panel, insert a div. It says, insert wrap around selection. I'm going to click a new CSS rule. I want it to be an ID called container, and it's going to appear and be defined in our styles.css style sheet that is linked to this document. So I say OK, and I add the styles I need. I don't need any special type or background. I do need, however, some box properties. I want that width to be 770 pixels, and I want my margin to be 0, auto, 0, auto, and that is the magic trick for making the content of your page kind of center in the browser window to accommodate for various widths of browser windows. I can say OK to this, and it will do two things. It will add CSS, and it will add the HTML. There you can see div ID equals container, and there's the closing div tag. Over here in our styles, if I scroll to the bottom, you see it added that container with the properties that I wanted. One more thing, if you remember from when we did our text editor version, I added a comment, and here's how to add a comment. I put my insertion point somewhere in my HTML where I'd like to add a comment, and I can control or right click, choose selection, and apply HTML comment. When I do that, it gives me a generic comment, and inside I can type closing container div. Okay, we'll save that. We'll save the styles. We can go down here to preview it in any browser we wish, and there it goes. We have a styled site that's better than an unstyled site, and hopefully you learned a little bit about how to style in a text editor and how you do the same thing in Dreamweaver. So stay tuned for our next tutorial where we'll be adding some media to our site.